Am I recording? Okay. Great, yeah, so we have to change the sign, so it's slightly different than subtraction. Distributing, I like that she said, distribute the negative one in. And then we combine like terms, like addition. Okay, in multiplication, we don't just start combining like terms right off. What do we do for multiplication? Yeah? How many times do we distribute? Right, so that's called a double distribution, because we distribute the 5x in, and then we distribute the 6 in. So good. And then after we distribute, what do we do? Right here. After we distribute, what do we do with all these terms? 15x squared minus 10x plus 18x minus 12. Add like terms. So then it goes back to an addition problem. Okay? So every problem results in adding like terms at the end. But multiplication, we have to do distribution twice. Subtraction, we have a single distribution, distributing the negative one in. And adding, there's no distribution. And they all add like terms. Okay, so you've done this before. You can help us out. On your handout, steps for creating questions. We're going to create a question for each section, like each chunk. So our first chunk is adding. We have an addition problem here. We're going to create a question. You could like ask your neighbor to help him study, and the answer is in the problem we've already written. So I'm going to read in our handout the middle box. Steps for creating questions. Step 1, read the essential question. We've done that. Step 2, review the first chunk, and we just did that. Step 3, identify the main idea, which we just talked about. It was adding. Now we're going to write a question for the first chunk that can be answered by the main idea. And on the bottom we have a list of, let's see, where is it? Here it is. A list of the 3 levels of questioning. Okay, so I don't want all of our questions to be a level 1. There's level 1, level 2, level 3. And level 1 is when you just like regurgitate information, like telling the definition or listing the steps. Complete, identify, recite, define. Those are level 1s. So we want to try to do more level 2s and level 3s. So level 2 takes a little bit more thought process. Level 2 asks us to compare, sort, infer, contrast, distinguish, analyze, classify, or explain why. And level 3 is even deeper thought process. Evaluate, judge, if then, predict, hypothesize, imagine, speculate, forecast. Okay? So you have those right in front of you on the bottom of your paper. So can you think of a level 2 or level 3 question, especially those who have done this before? Help us come up with a level 2 or level 3 question for adding polynomials. Okay, we could do that. Great. So what level would that be? Show it. Is it level 1, level 2? Thanks for putting your fingers up. Or level 3? Compare and contrast, adding polynomials to subtracting polynomials. 1, 2, 3. Great. That is a level 2. Let's write that in. Now, actually, we're going to have to formulate this in a little bit in the question. So compare and contrast like similarities and differences, right? So what are the similarities and differences of adding and subtracting polynomials? What are the, notice we're just writing in the left column, it is straight across from the addition problem, so it should be lined up with the addition problem. What are the similarities and differences of adding and subtracting polynomials? Question mark. What are the similarities and differences of adding and subtracting polynomials? Okay. We'll come back and actually answer that if you don't know the answer. We'll come back and answer it in a couple minutes. A question that Last class, or let's see, which class did I teach first in 8A? 2A for secondary math 3 came up with, and this was also a student who's done these questions before, so it's a lot easier for him. He came up with a level 3 question. He said, what would happen if the addition sign between the polynomials was changed to a different operation? How would that affect your answer? Okay, so if this was changed to subtraction, how would this affect the answer? If this said subtract instead of add right here, what would that change? M? We distribute it in, we still would have an x squared, right? But the 10 would be negative now, and the negative x would now be plus x. We still have x squared and x's, just our quantities of how, when we add them up, would be different. Versus, what would happen if we put a times right there? What is x squared times x squared when we distribute? X to the fourth. We don't get x to the fourth when we're adding or subtracting. So if you change the operation, the exponents are going to, if you change it to multiplication, the exponents would increase. Okay, so that's an example of a level 3 question. But level 2 works just as well. Okay, so we have one for adding. It kind of ties in with subtracting. Let's see if we can come up with another question to put next to our subtraction problems that revolves around subtraction. So level 2 or level 3. Compare, so level 2 is compare, sort, infer, distinguish, analyze, or explaining why. Any ideas? I know it's super early in the morning. Okay, I'm going to focus in on this -1. Can we make a question about this -1? So -1 only happens with subtraction. What can we ask about this -1 to help us study? Okay, so it would just turn into an addition problem, right? Okay, is this -1 really important? You could totally use that question. But I'm going to go with, why is it important to realize that the -1 distributes into the second polynomial? Because if you don't realize that, you do get the answer wrong every time. Okay, so let's write the question, why is it important to realize that the -1 is, on the second polynomial needs to be distributed in? Why is it important to realize that the second polynomial, and hopefully your column's a lot larger than my column, that the second polynomial needs to be multiplied by a -1. Since this is a complete sentence or a complete question, please don't just abbreviate your words like -1. Don't just put negative sign and a 1. Actually write it out. I'm doing a lot of writing today, so I expect complete sentences. Okay, I would say that's also a level 2 because it's asking why. Okay, now I want you to turn to your neighbor and come up with either a level 1 or a level 2 question. It's okay to do a level 1 if you've done a bunch of level 2s or 3s. I want you to come up with a level 1 or a level 2 question about multiplying polynomials. Okay, so turn to your neighbor. Turn to your neighbor and start discussing. What are some possible questions that's a level 1 even or a level 2 about multiplying polynomials? Okay, turn. You all have a partner. Turn and talk. And Gentry, if you could go all the way over and share with Cassie, please, and you choose share. Level 1 or level 2 about multiplying polynomials.
down to scroll down to the
This one? Okay. Adolfo and Arbor, have you guys discussed the question? Come up with a question, please. Then I would like you both to write your question, or maybe you have two separate questions in your column. Write your question in your column. So between you and your partner, you need to come up with a question about multiplying polynomials. And you write it right next to our multiplying examples. Okay. Great. I hear some great questions coming out. Put out what level your question is. Do you have a level 1, or level 2, or level 3? And like I said, it's okay this time to have a level 1 because we've already done a couple level 2s. Do you have a level 1, level 2, or level 3? Put it up, please. So every group should have their fingers up. Did you guys come up with a level 1, level 2, or level 3? Carlos, your group? What did you come up with? 2? Oh, we have some 2s. Good. And like I said, it's okay to have a level 1. Okay, Haley, why don't you share yours? Okay, the first binomial into the second binomial. Great. Okay, you guys have a level 2? Nathan, what's your question that you came up with? Okay, is explaining just listing? Do you just list the steps? When you say explain how you multiply polynomials, is it just listing the steps? So that will work for your question, but it is actually just a level 1 because it's a list. So explaining why, our second question, if you put the why factor in, then it becomes a level 2. Like, why is it important? Okay, so it's a little gray area, but that would be a level 1. Great, so those are some options. One yesterday I remember was, let's see, what did they say? This is a level 1 they came up with. What is the method used to multiply polynomials? And that would be double distribution, right? If we have a binomial times a binomial. Okay, after you write your questions, then you write a summary. And the first box on your handout has steps to how you write the summary. Okay, first we're going to read the essential question again and respond to it. So a summary is a paragraph. And can I borrow yours? Did you finish the notes yet? No, okay. So if she's actually not quite done with her notes, but she does still have a good space right here, and she has smaller handwriting. If you have large handwriting, this isn't going to be enough room for you. So lots of you, if you hit the bottom of the page, you're going to flip your paper over, and it'll probably take about a half page to answer this. And we write our summaries at the bottom at the end of our notes. So if you have super tiny handwriting, this would be enough space, but if you don't have tiny handwriting, if you have larger handwriting, you're going to need a whole, at least half a page on the back. Okay, thanks for letting me borrow that. So, flip your paper over if you don't have enough room. And those who actually have plenty of space on the front side, just underline where you left off and write summary. And we're going to start going over the summary. Now, summary should be full sentences. So, capital at the beginning, period at the end. You'll feel like you're in English class doing this. But if you can take math and explain it in your own words, it means you know it so much better. If you're able to explain it to where you could teach someone else, it means you actually understand it and know it so much better. So, our first step is to read the essential question and to answer the essential question. Okay, so our essential question was, what is required? Well, yours was slightly different, but it's the same idea. What is the difference between adding and subtracting polynomials versus multiplying polynomials? That's what ours says, right? Okay, so what is the differences between adding and subtracting polynomials and multiplying polynomials? We talked about this at the beginning. What do you do in adding polynomials? What's the steps? We just add like terms, okay? In subtracting, what do we do? First, we have to distribute a -1 into the second polynomial, and then add like terms. So there's a distribution, then we add like terms. And then multiplying polynomials, do we just add like terms? How many times do we distribute? If it's a binomial times a binomial, it's a double distribution. And then we add like terms. So they all have add like terms, but then it goes 0 distributions, 1 distribution, and multiplying is 2 distributions at least. Okay, so now you can answer in complete sentences the essential question. But you have to introduce it. You can't just say, in adding you just combine like terms. If I walked up to you in the hallway and said, Eric, in adding you just combine like terms. It doesn't really have any background information with it. So how do you answer a question so we understand what you're talking about? Restate the question. So, when adding polynomials, you do this, which is different than subtracting polynomials. And finally, multiplication is different because of, we've gone over the steps, the differences twice already today. So make sure you restate the question and explain why adding and subtracting is different than multiplying polynomials. Okay? Full complete sentences. You might need to come up when you're, both of you guys might need to start up about halfway up. Give yourself enough space. Great, okay, you have about 10 seconds to wrap it up. 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. So while writing our summary, we're now at steps 3 and 4. Okay, what does step 3 say? Could you read step 3 for us, please? Step 3, yep, right there. And then step 4? Okay, so first chunk again was on what type of problems? Adding polynomials. And then the question we wrote was, what are the similarities and differences of adding and subtracting polynomials? Now, some of you may have already answered this if you broke down adding, subtracting, and multiplying separately. Okay, so if you have already answered this, then our next step after answering the essential question would be to answer the higher order thinking questions in the column in order. So some of you have already answered that, so you're done with this part. If you haven't explained specifically what's different between adding and subtracting, making sure you're explaining that you have to distribute a -1 into the second polynomial, then you need to go and in a complete sentence explain what the difference is between adding and subtracting. And make sure you introduce it. Adding and subtracting polynomials are different because, or adding polynomials we do this versus in subtracting polynomials we do this. Okay, so I think lots of people have already done that one. So if you haven't, just make sure you catch that one up. Now we go on to the next section, which is subtracting. And we answer its question. Why is it important to realize that the second polynomial needs to be multiplied by a -1? Why is that important? Okay, so you need to answer that in a complete sentence. Make sure you introduce it by restating the question. It is important to realize this. If you have answered your third question, then I want you to turn to your neighbor and I want you to read the whole paragraph. But let's do different neighbors this time. Let's go front and back. So, we don't have a fourth row over here. So, let's see. Adam and Nathan, Amy and Joseph. Okay, and you two. Front and back. You two. Okay. So Chibs and Cassie, Gentry, and Austin. Okay, and then you 6 that are remaining. Wait, on the hall pass. You 6 that are remaining, go find a different partner between the 6 of you. Okay, and share. Not right now. You're sharing with a partner. Okay, find a different partner you haven't shared with. And read your paragraphs, both of you read them top to bottom. Okay, Adam, you go all the way over to Nathan. Or Nathan, you come up. One of you needs to move closer. Okay, I hope both of you have shared. Those who have switched seats, return to your seat, please. And raise your hand if the person who read theirs to you had a great summary that you'd like to volunteer their summary. If you'd like to volunteer your neighbor's summary, raise your hand. Really? No one wants to pick on each other? Are you raising your hand? Oh, she was going like this. Okay. Who wants to pick someone in the room to read their summary? Anyone you want. Okay. So are you going to pick on your friend?
Yeah.
I don't know if she's quite finished it. She has a couple more sentences to go. So Silver, why don't you pick someone else? You're done? You finished it? Okay. Let me give you a mic then, and let's hear what you have.
Yeah.
Okay. When adding polynomials, you combine like terms, whereas in subtraction, we distribute -1 into the second polynomial, then combine like terms. Multiplication is different because you add all terms together.
We don't add all terms together. Multiplication, what do? Distribute how many times? We do a double distribution. So can you just change that on the end of yours? In multiplication, we do a double distribution. Okay? And I need one more. Actually, Cassie, why don't you pick? Backfired. Okay. Here you go, Silver. Read your whole paragraph, please.
Polynomials, you just need to add like terms. Subtracting polynomials, though, you need to distribute the -1 into the second polynomial, then add like terms. In multiplying polynomials, you need to do double distribution, then add like terms. The difference between adding and subtracting polynomials is that adding, you combine like terms. When subtraction, you need to distribute the -1 first. It is important to realize this second polynomial needs to be multiplied by -1 because if you don't, you'll get the wrong answer every time. The steps for multiplying polynomials are first you need to double distribute, then add like terms.
Okay. The only thing I would change a little bit, but it's not really good, except for on the, it's important to realize that when you distribute -1, you just said you get the answer wrong every time, which is true. There's like a little more specifics. What happens if you forget to distribute the -1? Why would our answer be wrong? What happens if we forget to distribute this -1? What happens to all of these? They're not necessarily going to always be positive because we have other examples where we have something that's already negative. What's going to happen to both these terms if we forget to times them by -1? Their signs will be wrong, and so when we combine them with the other like terms, we're going to get the wrong quantity. So, well, that sounded really good, Silver. Thank you. Okay, so all we'll be having for our homework tonight, especially because yesterday was that me making noises. Okay, all we're going to have for our homework tonight, especially because yesterday was a Monday, so we're going to do our notes are really short, and then we're going to do an activity that yesterday didn't get to do because they ran out of time, because it was a short day. And so your only homework will be to take the notes that we start today, because we're going to keep going with the same notes next time. And all you have to do is in the column write one higher order thinking question, which is a level 2 or a level 3. That's all you have to do for homework. Other than if you haven't done your test corrections, keep going with those. Okay, so